Alright, so the first example is asking you guys to find a coterminal, a positive coterminal and a negative coterminal. So remember, these are angles that have the same initial side, the same terminal side, they just have different degree measures, right? So 9 pi over 4, generally speaking, to find another positive, you just simply add, in this case it would be 2 pi. So we have 9 pi over 4 plus 2 pi. And again, to get, you need a common denominator, so convert the 2 pi. That one becomes 8 pi over 4. That's 2 pi. And we add them together and you get 17 pi over 4. So that's a coterminal angle to 9 pi over 4. They start and end in the same place, but they have different measures. To find the negative, we take our 9 pi over 4 and subtract 2 pi. So again, we can convert it to a common denominator, which is 4. So the 2 pi becomes 8 pi over 4. And that gives us pi over 4. So that's not negative, correct? Okay, so then we have to do this again. So we take pi over 4 minus 2 pi, but we already know we're going to convert it to a denominator 4. So 8 pi over 4. So that gives us negative 7 pi over 4. So now we have a negative angle. So this is a coterminal. So what this means is, let's say, let me draw it right here, that 9 pi over 4 would be an angle that goes, remember every rotation is 2 pi, right? So we go, and 9 pi over 4 is the same as 2 1/4 pi. Changing the 9/4 to a mixed number is 2 1/4. So that means that it goes around 2 pi, so that's one rotation, and 1/4 of a pi, so it ends up somewhere right here. Okay, that's the angle that was given to you, 9 pi over 4. Let me put an arrow right there. And what we did for 17 pi over 4 right there, all we did is we added, we started here, and then instead of stopping here, we went one more time around, and then we landed right there. So that's, I should probably change the color, so that's that one right there. For the negative, for this one, we started, again, same spot, and negative 7/4 pi is negative 1 3/4 pi. So we went negative pi and 3/4 of a pi. So we landed right there. And that's your negative angle. And we could find an infinite number of coterminal angles, both positive and negative, if you just spin around, spin around, spin around, and just do more and more rotations. Okay, but for now we'll just keep it at these two. Alright, so for part B, they started by giving you guys a negative angle. So for the positive, we'll add 2 pi. Again, to get a common denominator, that becomes 6 pi over 3. And so that gives me 6 minus 1, 5 pi over 3. And that's a positive angle, so we'll stop there. For the negative angle, negative pi over 3 minus 2 pi. So again, that's another 6/3 pi. And so that's negative 5 pi over 3, and there's your negative angle. Forgot to add the pi, sorry. Okay, and so here's the positive, and here's the negative. For example 2 from page 7, you're converting these angles in degree into angles in radians without a calculator. So they want the answer in terms of multiples of pi. So we take 75 degrees, and remember to convert from degree to radian, we multiply by pi over 180. Then the degree symbol cancels, and then you just reduce. Since you're not getting the decimal answer, you're just reducing this as much as possible. So 75 over 180 is 5 over 12. That's as reduced as you can make it. So same thing for 320. I'll just go ahead and multiply this by pi over 180. The degree symbols cancel. And when you reduce 320 over 180, you get 16 pi over 9. So you can reduce them by 20, both top and bottom. Okay? So now in example 3, we're going the other way around. You have the angles in radian, and they want you guys to convert it to degrees. So you take pi over 6, and so now we take the reciprocal of the one we used in example 2, because we want to end up with degrees. The pi reduces, cancels out, and 180 divided by 6 is 30. That would be the answer. Same thing with 5 pi over 3. And remember what I told you in class, the angle does not have to have a pi to be a radian. These two examples happen to have pi, but as long as it doesn't have a degree symbol, you know it's a radian. So when you multiply 5 times 180 divided by 3, we end up with 300 degrees. Alright, so for example 4 on page 9, it reviews with you guys the concept of supplementary and complementary angles. Remember from Integrated 2 or Geometry, you guys learned that complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees, and now with radians that would be the same as pi over 2. And supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. In terms of radians, it would be pi. So 36 degrees for part A. You could set it up like this for the complement. 36 plus the complementary angle is 90. Okay, so we subtract 36 from both sides, and we end up with the complementary angle equal 90 minus 36 would give you 54. And then for the supplementary, you could do one of two things. You could set up the equation like this. Okay, or you could think it through and say, okay, if to 90 I needed 54, to 180 just add 90 to 54. So the supplementary angle would be 144. Again, you could get that by adding 90 to 54 or just subtracting 36 from 180. Same thing. So for letter B, 91 degrees is already bigger than 90, right? So this has no complementary angle. Okay, but it does have a supplementary angle. So we do 91 plus the supplement should equal 180. Subtract 91 from both sides and you get the supplementary angle is 89 degrees. Okay, so there. And this one has no complementary. Pi over 6, we're changing over to radians now. So for the complement of pi over 6, it has to add up to pi over 2. Because 90 degrees is half of 180. So pi over 2 is half of pi. So we're going to do pi over 6 plus its complement is pi over 2. Subtract pi over 6. So in this one, some of you may not be able to do mental math with this as we did with the degrees. So I'll just show you the steps here. We need a common denominator, which is 3. So that means this pi over 6 becomes 3 pi over 6, right? So 3 pi over 6 minus pi over 6 is 2 pi over 6, which can be reduced to pi over 3. So that's the complement of pi over 6. For supplement, pi over 6 plus the supplement is pi, so we subtract pi over 6 from pi, and we get 5 pi over 6. Okay, and that's the supplement. 5 pi over 6, well, think about it. Pi over 2 is half, right? Is like our 90 degrees. It's the same as 90 degrees. 5 pi over 6 is bigger than pi over 2. So this one has no complement. I could either write it out like this or do it like I did on letter B. So no complementary angle. Why? Because 5 pi over 6 is already bigger than pi over 2. Okay? But we could find its supplement. 5 pi over 6 plus the supplement is pi. Because 5 pi over 6 is less than pi, right? So we can subtract 5 pi over 6 from both sides, and we get minus 5 pi over 6. So the supplement of 5 pi over 6 is pi over 6.